Like we always have such good stuff at the beginning anyway. Oh, goodness. Which reminds me, I might almost for sure will be at Leadville this year.
What?
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because we are going to do a show.
Yeah. So we had such amazing response and feedback at Unbound this year. It was like, we were there a couple years ago before we had lube and sealant and stuff, and it was just fun talking with people. But oh my God, I mean, we were just, I think the guys sold out of everything they brought in like the first 6 hours. It was nuts. And, and then
awesome.
Really we're sagging and helping. And so I was like, well, so our one van's on the road that same weekend somewhere else. I don't remember what's going on, but, I said, maybe I'll hop in the other van and go to Leadville. So
that would be so cool.
Yeah, it would be, it would be cool.
Okay.
And I could meet you in person. I bet our listeners don't realize that we've never actually met each other in person.
This is how we know each other.
Right.
Oh. Speaking of Unbound,
this is how we know each other.
Did you know my daughter Melissa took third in the women's pro for the Grand Prix.
Oh,
totally kicked ass.
This is
fifth woman and third in the Grand Prix women that were there, correct?
Yeah, ahead of a lot of not all of the big names, but a lot of the big names.
Yeah,
and so
good for
Bella
her.
who suddenly decided that they ought to have an interview with her today.
Yeah,
I'd say so.
Could have told them that last year, but whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
good for
getting
her.
this into the pre-show.
And then before we get this show rolling, because Fatty and I were talking about what's in, what's out for AJA 24, which is what we're going to record. Josh, did you get a chance to hear the Aerometer show that went up?
I still have not listened to that. I'm sorry.
I will listen to that. So I will not ask you to respond or to react, you probably could without listening to it. But just keep in mind for the next time we gather on this show, some thoughts about, field aero testing using no-show type products, which I'm sure you're aware of, and the others. And if you have a chance to listen to me, Michael reached out to you about coming on that show, right? Michael Lieberzon with Endurance Innovation Podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just got to find it.
If you have a chance while in Ireland to listen to that show I did with him, I'm sure you would have some follow-up input on that. Which could prove to be valuable for folks too. Because that's just kind of hanging out there right now with just me and him. Robert Chung commented on it, and he gave it a thumbs up, which I was like, "Oh, that's it. I've done it. I retire.
You've arrived." I did see that. I'm like, "Oh, Robert had excellent things to say." Like we've done well.
I know. I knew I did well when he said it was cool. So
yeah, kudos.
Okay, cool.
You got the script up?
Oh. Let me remember how to find the script.
I can give you a link if that would help.
I'll get there. I'm pulling up Drive
because I'm good with computers.
I'm supposed to be good with computers.
Here we go. Here in the chat, I just pasted a link to the doc.
Oh,
if that makes it easier to get to.
Oh, there's the chat. Oh, I didn't even know there was a chat at Riverside. Look at that. Man.
Yeah.
There is a chat.
Yeah.
Riverside is stepping up their game. I'm liking them more and more.
Very cool. Okay. I have it.
All right. So this is clearly, I'm going to guess, the first time you've seen it. Right?
Yes. I do.
All right.
I do.
This will be fun.
Love when you write these and there's just all the pink. Josh, react.
React.
No, but you guys make it so easy for me. Truly, like I can show up unprepared and then I just have to react. I'm good at talking.
That's why we're here.
So
Thank you. Call it episode 78. Put Josh on the spot. Number 24.
I mean, we're devising a way to try and make it even easier, which is just just bring you in for the questions, and Friday and I can handle the rest. We can handle the bookends and everything else, unless you like being here for the, the theatrics.
Josh loves doing the ad reads.
Yeah, I mean, I like having your voice right at the end there, too, signing off to people. It's great, but, your time is valuable, and we want to respect that, too, when we're doing these things. So... And by the way, I wanted to follow up. Speaking of Riverside, and we're talking, folks should know, we're talking over a program called Riverside, which is for podcasters and vlogcasters. Josh, is this working out for you okay? Because, I mean, the intention was, to get you off Zoom, which seemed to be like a real hassle. You're having a hassle with your guests, getting them to record themselves, blah, 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 and get on the Zoom. Is Riverside working out okay for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's been great, other than the time I switched my mic to my AirPods. And I didn't realize it. And I will say one issue is I talked with Nelson Vales a few weeks back, and he could not get Riverside to work on his computer. And so we moved it to Teams, and then we just had audio problem on top of audio problem. So that one will have to we'll have to rework that.
The intention with Riverside
mic and,
the intention with Riverside was to make it easier on you, so you could react and just get a guest on and send them a link, and boom, you guys would be on, which I think you're trying to do a lot of that. Okay, good. That's what I want to hear.
I would say the bigger issue is as you know, Hadi, because you live in it, is the microphone thing. Yeah,
that is.
So we do have the one now that we're shipping around for, like we did with Phil.
Right.
But
who, by the way, was waiting for a return shipping notice.
Yeah, we got that out. No. We got that out.
Okay,
but it's just not. Awesome. It's just not possible with like Dan Bigham or like folks in Europe or Asia. It just gets a little like we kind of get what we get, and it's not always the best quality.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make the workflow a little easier on you as you got guests on the fly like that. And that was kind of the intention of going to Riverside, and the fact that they can be turned around as vlogs so easily. So Michelle can just grab them and put them up, which is great. So.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's
what else
happy.
Before we do the show? Do we want to, Josh? Did you? I saw you in Velo News, in the Leonard Zinn column, talking about and I've talked to Adam about this too, about degreasers becoming an issue in certain jurisdictions. It's happening here, obviously, for me here in LA. I cannot get my hands on mineral spirits, on denatured alcohol, on acetone. Did you want, you addressed it in Velo? Did you want to talk about it at all here quickly in this show now? Has it become that timely? Can we sit on that? Are you sure? Maybe you have something you're working on that?
Yeah, all the above, really. Yeah, I mean, because like our degreaser is like the world's friendliest degreaser, and it just works much slower. But we are working on a more aggressive one that pushes those health and safety boundaries maybe a little bit further. But not nearly as far as, the stuff we're talking about here. So yeah, let's throw it in the script.
You want to do it now? Okay. Fatty, I can just,
or we can do it in the next one.
Whatever seems most timely. I mean, if you've got a product coming out, and maybe we wait closer to that. We could certainly squeeze it in, Fatty, like right as we do a Where in the World is Josh.
I'm happy to have you just drop it in. I mean, if you see a good place to put it.
I've got it right here. I can just take this pink out. It says Aerometers follow-up, which is not going to happen now. We'll do that later. And I will just put a quick note in here.
While he's doing that, Josh, I wanted to say that the Ultimate Sealant worked a treat at 12 Hours of Mesa Verde for me.
Oh, good.
So that's
good to hear.
That's a mountain bike race. I did what should have been a good, hard, two-sided pinch flat when I hit a nice square rock at speed. I had some of that sealant spray up my shorts, as as it will, as the tires rotate. That's one of the best things about sealant is it's always going to let you know. It's like, wow, is it raining? In the snow? What? And then before my tire could even deflate, completely it went from going to just, and it was gone. That was it.
Awesome.
Finished the lap.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Never got off my bike. Checked my pressure later. I lost 3 psi. It sealed that fast.
For a double, that's pretty good. That's good to hear. Yeah,
stain.
I mean, it's certainly a learning curve on our end. We're,
it's old me.
No, it's been an awesome experience. We had a guy. I wasn't at Unbound, but Travis had a guy come up after the race, and he had 6 different cuts and punctures.
Holy cow!
That had all sealed, and the tire was kind of like yours, down 4 psi or something, and it was just so it's
not
it's
only
pretty
seals,
cool.
it seals fast. Is
quick. Yeah, I know it is really quick. But it's such a fun experience. Because it's not like people don't put the chain lube on and then go out and be like, oh my god, I'm a kilometer an hour faster, right? It's like, oh, that's nice. But yeah, with this one, it's like the feedback's immediate, and it's been fun.
Sure. I mean, I've had enough flats
good to hear.
Good to hear. I have a good sense of what works and what doesn't, and it really worked. It was great. I was super happy. I was super happy to not have to get off and change, put in a tube.
I did hear one bike grumbler on another podcast. I won't say because you're recording, Fatty, right now, who that was. Say that they had a client said that they could actually hear the carbon fiber rolling around in their tires. Is that even possible?
Yeah. So we've had. I'll say we've actually had a couple, and we're trying to get to the bottom. We think it's been consistent across a couple of tires where the sealant seems to dry quickly. And so it's been interesting. It's actually the specialized, they're made in Vietnam. It's like the Pathfinder Pro. There's 4 tires. Yeah. And it's interesting that we actually bought one and we're able to recreate it. It's some interaction between the tire and the sealant begins to thicken and turn the color of the tire casing. So it's like there's an interaction there in the rubbers. And when it gets thick, then the carbon starts to want to clump together, and then it ultimately just gets tossed around. And so we're testing now.
You might be able to hear it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we're testing now that theoretically, if you just add some more replenisher to keep it diluted. But yeah, it's interesting. After about a month, you pop the tire open, and the sealant's gone from water viscosity to kind of almost like maple syrupy viscosity. And that's just enough to let the carbon clump, and the foaming action goes away. Which is part of what gave us the insight that it was likely some sort of chemical thing. We've reached out to them to try to figure it out, because there's one other. There's a Terravale brand where we've had 1 or 2 customers have kind of similar things. And but what's interesting is after it happens the first time, you clean it out and put more in, and then it doesn't happen again. So,
all right, my apologies for calling it BS.
We said the same thing. We're like, we said the same thing. We're like, that's crazy, and then actually, it was true. But it's the fun. It's the fun, not fun part of product, right? It's there's just no way to test every tire in the world and everything, and sometimes you just see stuff that's well, that doesn't make any sense. But
this was a good pre-show.
Not perfect, but we're working on it.
I know. Well, one more pre-show thing too, and as you're listening to Aerometers, Josh, the other thing I've been writing down as a possible talk to Josh thing about on this show is porpoising. Have you been watching the F1 thing on porpoising? And you have some. I'm sure you have some thoughts. I mean, I wrote down hop bifurcation ? Right away. But maybe we make that as part of our next discussion.
Yeah, get it in there. No, that's a fun one.
Yeah, I think I've been really fascinated by it, and how some of these teams, some of these great teams, Mercedes, have been tripped up by the whole problem. So it is an interesting one. Okay, cool. We'll talk about that in a future one. And hopefully they don't all fix it. I'm hoping they're all still bouncing down. Some of them are still bouncing down the track uncontrollably.
One of the two of you is bumping your mic. I don't. Oh, okay.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's me and my new microphone.
Yeah. Is it? Are you bumping your mics down because it really resonates through?
No. It's the table.
Wow. Goes all the way up your mic.
I'm on a new microphone, folks. It is a Heil PR40. No relation to the Nazis.
It sounded fancy until you mentioned the Nazi thing, and now you just got me thinking about Nazis.
Yeah.
So.
I know. Sorry.
Did we have to go there?
It's a good microphone. But the shock mount is
not very shocky.
Not the greatest. No, it's not.
I'm on a road, people. It's from Australia.
Is it?
Think about shrimp on the Barbie.
Actually, the Heil is a USA company. So.
Oh, interesting.
All right.
I'll do my best, Fatty, not to bump my desk.
I didn't know which one of you it was.
It was me. Yeah, it's me.
Well, should we do this?
In fact, if I thump on the ground, you can probably hear that too.
Go back to the script. Yeah. Oh, last thing before I'll forward it to you guys, but we've got a new mid-roll sponsor coming on, so I'll make the introductions. But it, somewhat ironically, is a company called Engo, which is heads-up display sunglasses.
As long as they send us sunglasses,
really,
so quite similar to form, as we had previously. But it's actually interesting. It's a part of a French company that makes like the heads-up displays for aircraft and fighter pilot helmets and all that stuff, and they're working on developing it. It's really interesting stuff.
We will soon be nothing but ads.
I will forward it on.
What a treat.
Yeah.
Going to be a delight.
Well, does Josh know we have the feed now?
I suddenly was wondering that. We have...
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
The
feed? Cool.
The feed is also sponsoring us. Like I say, soon, nothing but ads. I'm looking forward to my own heads-up display. I'm curious what kind of data do I want when I'm on a bike? I just want something that scrolls by frequently saying, "You're doing okay. Keep going. It's all right."
So you're doing okay, or you're
going to be all right.
Like you'll be okay. You're going to be
reassurances.
All right.
My form goggles actually ended up at Rice University with my nephew, who was doing a heads-up display senior project for the new Army helmets, and they wanted to put data in the goggle so that the soldier could see stuff in real time, and they had sensors that were relaying stuff. So, and he took my form goggles down there to for an example of how to do some of that stuff.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I still swim with mine every day.
And he graduated too, which is fun. And I saw Lance Armstrong at the graduation. So.
Wow.
Okay.
All good stuff. And I still don't swim, so there you go.
And neither do I. Not at all.
Are we going to do the tire questions before we do the AJA? Audie?
Let's do it after, I suppose. It's fine.
AJA and then bonus questions.
It doesn't matter to me, but
bike tires. Yep.
About Leadville, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay.
I'm still recording. We're 20 minutes into this.
Yeah, but we're not recording.
That's what I said. I think all the good stuff happens before. We never start on time.
I am fine with that.
We're not even close. It's good. Okay.
But I like these.
But let's do it. I do have a 3 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we'll invite them into the show.
So
great idea.
Countdown?
Yeah. It's for a little post reel.
Countdown, yes.
Countdown.
We decided this is show 78, right?
AJA 24.
Show 78. AJ 24. Countdown in 5,
3,
4, 3,
2,
1. Oh, I'll record there too. All righty, in the script, go to the top of the script. All right, here we go. The Marginal Gains podcast is brought to you by Silca, creators of the finest pumps and tools for bicycles.
Tagline. I mean, pumps and tools, that's like 15% of what Silca does now. We should do an episode soon where we list all the new products Silca has shipped just since we started doing this show.
Yeah, like computer mounts, bike cleats, tire sealant and replenisher, 3 different kinds of lube, bottle cages, Aero, socks, warm socks, new seat bags. And, of course, that list just continues to grow.
It has been a productive pandemic for you.
It has. It really has. Yeah, we let all that time at home to think, it turned out better than you could have imagined.
Josh in his house, and he starts inventing stuff. It's worked out well for you.
Yeah, and other people. I mean, we got some new stuff coming with some couple of universities that you get bored and you start reaching out to people who write papers and, hey, would you collaborate with us on this? And they were stuck at home too, so they all said yes. So it's fun how the world works like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we are also sponsored. Oh, I was just going to say, we're also sponsored by Shimano, which has been making the finest cycling components you can buy for more than a century.
And I will add that Laser makes the best helmets you can buy. Courtesy of Laser, which is one of the companies in the Shimano family. I've been riding with a couple of different Laser helmets, one for mountain biking, one for road, both utilizing their Virginia Tech 5-star rated Kineticore technology.
Kineticore is the result of a decade-long search for a new, improved technology. It protects against both direct and rotational impact thanks to unique EPS foam blocks called controlled crumple zones that crumple under impact and absorb the energy that otherwise would have reached the cyclist's brain.
They are the best helmets you can be wearing if you choose to crash. So they also turn out to be really light and comfortable helmets the rest of the time, which is really nice when you are not crashing in the moment. They are cool, they're ventilated, they are easy to adjust to fit to your own unique head size, and let's face it, this is important, they really look good. On the road, I've been riding with the Strada. I've gotten several compliments on it. On the dirt, I've been wearing the Jackal, which has a really great, easy to adjust on-the-fly visor. That is not a minor thing. And it has the most perfect clasp I have ever used. It's the only clasp I can remember that I can click on or click off with one hand, which is nice when there is a bee in your helmet.
So they're not bee-proof?
As far as I know, they are not yet bee-proof. Please work on that, Laser.
All right. Well, they certainly, despite the bee-proof thing, they are definitely great helmets, and you'd expect no less from Laser. So please check them out, lasersport.us, and that's Laser, Lazer.
It's an Ask Josh Anything episode, including questions about tire pressure, of course, staying aero, another obvious one, and wireless braking, right now on Marginal Gains. Okay. Where did it? Oh, here. It's right here. Okay. This is the Marginal Gains podcast, the show that makes a big deal about the little things and how those little things can be a big deal. This is episode 78, also known as Ask Josh Anything, number 24. I'm Hottie.
And I'm Josh Portner from Silca.
It has been far too long since we have had an AJA episode, but we're going to correct that right now on Marginal Gains.
And normally Fatty or I would cut in line with our questions, but this time we're going straight to the rather largest pile that have been sent in by text, voice, and comments, except this one. Josh, summer's always the busiest season for you with pro cycling events. There's that little race they run around France that's coming up. So give us a preview. What is your travel schedule looking like for the next couple of months, and what are you going to be doing?
Oh, goodness. I am traveling like crazy, and none of it for work.
Really?
So, yeah, I crammed all my – I was at Roubaix. I was in the Netherlands for a while, then home, then was back a couple weeks ago. Was at Silverstone for some aero testing with one of the teams, and which is with EF, and that's part of the whole like Netflix Drive to Survive, but for cycling thing, which was interesting. So it was an odd couple days at the wind tunnel with a bunch of cameramen and boom operators like rolling around. But no, my summer is all of our canceled COVID vacations occurring at one time now. So I'm going to be in Africa for a while on a huge family trip, and we're also doing Ireland. And what else are we doing? And then, at the end of the year, I think we've got a Galapagos trip or something. So it's my wife is an insane vacation planner. I mean, she's like unbelievable at it. And when things would get canceled, she would just plan something new. But then, of course, they all just rolled up. And so here we are. 3 vacations in 1 year. crazy.
Boy, she should be a director sportif, or maybe she is in Team Fortner.
She is.
Sounds like it.
Hey, before we get to kind of like the podcast, I just show up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She's amazing.
Well, Josh, of course, I've been in the chain spa as usual with springtime here and wanting to get chains all ready to go. And look, there's something that's starting to percolate, if you will, regarding the cleaning agents we've been telling people to use, the ones I like to use, and these are happening in specific jurisdictions around the country and I presume in other parts of the world. And that is, the use of mineral spirits, which I love for cleaning, getting that factory grease off the chain. It's something that you have suggested, that Adam Curran down at Zero Friction Cycling highly endorses. They call it terps or something else down there. And, of course, denatured alcohol we use to clean that film off the chain that once we've degreased it properly. Denatured alcohol, acetone, these are the products we like to use. Now, in some jurisdictions like mine, I'm in L.A., we have something here called the Air Quality Management District. They have essentially banned for sale mineral spirits and denatured alcohol, and I believe acetone as well. So, the question becomes, what do we turn to when these products are starting to be taken away from us? Now, Adam at ZFC has done a nice new write-up on Ceramic Speed's UFO Clean and how to use it to properly decrease the chain. Do you have any other thing you can add on here, Josh, about what we might be able to turn to get our chains, completely degreased, so then we can go ahead and hot wax them or put a good lube on them?
Yeah, you can still go the citrus degreaser route, and there's a couple of them out there that are strong, that work well. I think Chemical Guys makes one that's pretty good. Simple Green has an aircraft product, so do not, I think we've covered that before, do not use normal Simple Green on your bike or your chain because it can promote hydrogen embrittlement and lead to cracking. But they make an aircraft approved product called Extreme Aircraft, or it's kind of a silly name. It works quite well. The Ceramic Speed, we've played around with that. It works well and quickly. It does have some bad stuff in it. So it may be, it's probably off of California's radar, but, part of why it works well is that, it's strong. Silca Biodegreaser is really, we developed it to go in the gear wipe, and it's which is a product that we also want you to be able to scrub your hands with. And so it is probably the safest degreaser on the market. It's the only degreaser I know of that has an HMIS little safety rating that's all zeros. I think the Ceramic Speed is 1s and 2s, and a lot of these things are just full of 3s, right? The worst. But yeah, so the big difference is really in time. You can soak a chain in Silca Biodegreaser overnight, and you'll get about the same effect you get with the Ceramic Speed UFO Clean in about 10 minutes. So it's just that trade-off there. But yeah, all those things will work, and then you're going to want to finish off with a water rinse for all of them and a dry. And, that's really a lot of, the strong chemicals are really buying you time, throw out mineral spirits for an hour, or if you use it in an ultrasonic cleaner, and then, rinse that out with acetone, and the chain dries in, 5 minutes coming out of the acetone. And so you're really just adding time as you go to these more friendly water-based products. But I would say all of those will get you to as clean and well prepped a chain as you would get with the harsher chemicals. It's just going to be a little bit slower.
Yeah, you and I have talked about the Simple Green Aerospace product. I have a jug of that. It does require, it does call for some dilution. Like at full strength, I would gather there would be some risk of embrittlement there if you use it full strength and soak for too long.
That's a good question. My understanding on the chemistry is that it's about like balancing the hydrogen atoms in the mixture itself. It's like putting something in there that essentially is capturing them. So I wouldn't think that would be affected by whether you dilute it or not. I'm not sure. I will say I have used it full strength before without issue, but that's actually probably a good question to put to them.
Okay.
All right. Let's go to some listener questions after Hadi said he was not going to put in 2 of his questions and then did. I'll get you later for that, Hottie. Next time I'm jumping the line.
All right.
Here's
Guilty.
a question that as soon as I heard it, I knew I wanted it on the show. I can interpretatively read what he said if you like. But basically, it's a fun hypothetical on what would it take for you to buy into the idea of wireless braking?
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. I mean that is a really fun question. I mean, the first place it takes me, honestly, is aircraft, and I think, back certainly when I was at university, there was this big debate happening between Boeing and Airbus, where all of the Boeing aircraft have mechanical redundancies to their electronic, what might otherwise be electronically controlled flight systems or flight controls. So like the yoke that the pilots are using to control the ailerons and the rudder and all of those control surfaces. There are also cables as backup. Airbus uses a electronic joystick, and all of the redundancies are also electronic. And I remember a lot of my professors saying it'll never work. There's going to be problems. You can't have enough redundancy. And I think the safety of aircraft systems over time has shown us that they're clearly doing it pretty well. Now, of course, aircraft maintenance and inspection is generally going to be done at a level kind of well beyond, where we are with our bicycles. I would say it's totally possible. I personally would want to see it on the market for years before I considered writing it.
You're not going to beta test it, huh?
Even then, I might limit where I was using it. Do you want to go ride this thing in the Alps? Probably not. But it's fun to think about. So yeah, I mean, his thing about separate, essentially how to build the redundancies in is really what the question goes. Multiple transmitters, receivers, batteries, letting one be able to take over the other. And the challenge really just becomes like, as you add complexity, you're just also then adding more potential failure points to the system. But I think the big one here is, you would really need some sort of, I would say, kind of bulletproof system or like a diagnostic system for it, that, something you could plug into it and let it do a self-inspection weekly or monthly or on some cadence where it could actually tell you that it's okay and it's not degrading, or that it's so yeah, that's a hard one. Part two, how big would the battery be? Yeah, I mean, it depending on how you did it would probably have to be a reasonable sized battery, because there is a decent amount of force there. But I could see some sort of linear actuator, pushing a cylinder in a hydraulic system that, you could. I mean, we could probably make that work for, I don't know, days or weeks worth of riding. I mean, it's probably not all that much more force than you're seeing in some of the shifting that systems are capable of. So the question really just becomes how long are you using it, right? Like, which actually takes me to, how many seconds are spent shifting versus how many seconds are spent braking, and braking's got to be
much more.
I don't know, 50 to 1, 100 to 1. Yeah, especially on a mountain bike, right?
So what if we took out the wireless component of that? So, say, okay, it's wired. Okay, so that level of complexity is gone. And suspend the question about battery weight or even system weight. If we somehow make those into gimmies, does electronic braking on bikes become compelling then? I think about, if my bike had ABS capability, I would really love that. The other electronic, and sensor components, on a bike, electronic braking, I can imagine, if I could just, grab a lever and it applied the right amount of braking to my front and back, depending on which I need, that could be pretty awesome. I was curious what you would think about about that. Have you ever thought about electronic braking on a bike from a performance perspective?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody's probably thought about it, right? I know there's a number of people out there who've been working on, certainly on the ABS side of things. I mean, there's a half a dozen patents, and you go to some of the Asian trade shows in particular. There's at least 3 or 4 that I can think of, companies that have been working on ABS type systems for years. Whether it's in the caliper or the brake pad. I think again, I mean, it becomes like a sensor control loop. Kind of feedback problem. I mean, just coming at this from, I think one of the challenges with ABS is you need a really accurate way to tell when the wheel is sliding. And if you look at, how we do it in automotive today, it's relatively crude. It's like a gear spinning another gear, and there's a sensor in the gear that's being spun. I think some of them might even do it with light sensors and little like perforated discs. I mean, but they're all kind of doing the same. There's some sensor that's basically an on-off switch that's being triggered by the stop of the spinning, and then you get this sort of uncontrolled pulsation. I think what you're thinking of is more of a almost like a mind read. To hear you say it sounds almost more of like a mind reading thing, where like it's going to give you the maximum amount of braking you can possibly have for the situation you're in. And I think that would be super cool. But from a sensing perspective and a surface variability perspective would probably be really hard to execute. Call it 20 years, right? Think of the way technology is advancing, the chips, the batteries, some sort of AI. You definitely need to sensor things up, but there's a ton of that already on bikes and more coming. I could see that. I could see that happening.
And I mean, it seems a little wacky, but at the same time, e-bikes, are becoming more and more popular, and weight isn't as much of a concern, and the power source is there. Yep. Electronic braking on an e-bike could be really a fantastic feature to have, right? Whether, so you just, you grab a little and it modulates the front and back for what you need. You grab a lot and it gives, it gives you the quickest stop it can possibly give you. I mean, there's some, I don't know. It's a more interesting problem when you start bringing in the fact that there is already a lot of power and a lot of battery on a lot certainly now. So I'll look for them in 20 years. I'll be about the right age for an e-bike at that point.
Certainly on the e-bike front too. I mean, you could actually use an electronic brake, like that's magnet based, kind of like a mag trainer, where you're actually using that to generate or regenerative braking, right? Where the brake's actually like pushing 2 magnets against a plate or something. That's actually creating a current that you could feed back at some level into the battery to be able to recapture. I mean, that's not a good setup because it's non-contact. That's not a good setup for like stopping, but certainly for slowing. So you would want that in combination with some physical brake. But I mean, I don't know if Tesla has. I know Prius has regenerative braking. I would assume Tesla would have some form of that. I'm not super familiar with them. That could be quite interesting.
Okay, it sounds like a problem for the next generation of marginal gainers. So let's bring it back to our generation. Problems we can solve now, right? We're going to go to a question, in fact, that takes us out of the hypothetical and to the practical from Dennis Connors. Now, Dennis is somebody we should get to know. He is a U.S. paracycling champion. And by the way, folks, if you want to see some marginal gains in action and some folks are going to really take advantage of them, watch anything para, especially if it involves a marathon or cycling, especially the marathon. I watched the Boston Marathon recently, and the paracyclists went off first, and those folks are dialed. Like, they get down low, they pay attention to what they're doing, their wheels are incredibly narrow, and they're doing rule of 105 and the whole bit. Anyhow, for Dennis, he said he just returned from Europe where he has won 2 UCI World Cups in Belgium and got a second in the road race in Germany. So congrats, Dennis. His question is about rear tire pressure. He rides a trike. It's one of the bikes he rides is a trike. 2 wheels on the back, 1 up front. And he says his weight is distributed over the 2 rear wheels predominantly. How, he asks, does this differ from a rear wheel setup affect tire pressure? In other words, how should he adjust his tire pressure to address the fact that he has 2 rear wheels and not 1? Now, he runs the Vittoria Corsa Speed tubeless. He typically rides on decent, as he calls it, to smooth pavement. Now, Dennis sent us a couple photos, too. They're pretty cool. We'll try to get these on the site for the folks on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can,
cool.
envision what we can kind of tell you what the bike looks like if you're listening on the podcast. It's a traditional bike from the
triangle,
essentially from the front triangle portion, and the chain stays the same. Yeah, it looks like they are. So it even has a rear triangle.
Yeah,
it's all right there. The main difference is that he has an axle on the back with 2 wheels attached. Now, I can't tell, Josh, I don't know if you can, if power is being evenly distributed to both rear wheels, but his question remains the same, like, how do I maximize, how do I get the right tire pressure for those rear wheels? And for the front, for that matter, which, because his weight bias is all kind of changed here.
Mm. Yeah, that's really cool. Really what you're doing when you put 2 wheels where there would be 1, each of them now has half the load. So I think a great starting point would be to, use something like the Silca tire pressure calculator as a 2-wheel bike, and then take the rear pressure and cut it in half. It's really would probably be your best starting point, because the tires really are going to see half the load. And the thing we're after with the tire pressure calculator is really trying to match the spring rate to the load, the loads involved and the surface. And so if we have half the load, you're probably going to want to look at about half the pressure. And from there, I think, and I see actually you've got it suggested right here in the script. You guys were answering this question.
We took a swing.
Start with the calculator, cut it in half, and then go test it using the Chung method. I think that would be a fabulous way to do it. As we've talked about before, I mean, Chung, it's a little daunting to at first, but once you've done it, even a handful of times, you can really go out and in an hour and a half collect some really really solid data. That's going to tell you stuff that stuff that you just would not have gotten by any other method, particularly when it comes to rolling resistance. So, I would say too, for events like this, and I know we've done this with some athletes at like some of the Olympic courses and things, where like once you're really experienced and fluent in the Chung virtual elevation, if your event is a closed course event that allows access beforehand or even like the day beforehand, we've actually just used laps on a course as our Chung methodology test laps, because that's really for virtual elevation, you just need a consistent lap of some sort, and to be able to put a string together, then make a change, do another string, and so on. So yeah, this is cool. I'll also say for Dennis, I can see just looking at it, he's got a great picture of him sprinting head on. There's a lot of opportunity there in aerodynamically in the way the rear brake calipers are placed and the cables. We talk a lot about cabling, but I can see, I'd probably guess that's somewhere on the order of 40 to 50 centimeters of brake line exposed, and that, a rule of thumb, every pencil length of exposed brake cable housing or hydraulic line is worth about 8 seconds. It's my old Le Mans rule of 89. So it's a pencil length of cable is worth 8 seconds per 20K, which is what Fignon lost the 89 Tour by. So he's probably got at least 3 pencil lengths worth there to clean up. But
and if the rules allow,
bike too. Okay.
Yeah, if the rules allow, Josh, he should probably try and if he has the money to do this, design and build some type of cowling or fairing to go over those calipers and rotors to help guide the air around. Or he's got the wheel tucked right there close too. So would that be
I
would
say even if they could just be rotated so that they're at like the trailing edge of the caliper or the trailing edge of the disc, you know, kind of get them hidden behind that axle. Again, I don't know what the rules are either. So, you know, I think ideally you'd want to, you know, look at like what the F1 guys are doing, where you'd have sort of, like a fairing kind of around the whole caliper and rotor unit. And then those oftentimes blend into the strut, which in his case would be that sort of long axle assembly where you might be able to make that strut hollow or some sort of fairing and then run the cabling through it. But Dennis, please let us give it a shot and let us know what you find out in your virtual elevation testing, because that's a really interesting problem.
I was going to say, Dennis,
and congratulations to Dennis Connors. Way to go, buddy! That's excellent work, and keep us updated. This is fun stuff to look at, and way to represent the U.S. out there.
Finish line sprint face. Oh man, that is pure gold. Yeah, we got to put that out there. That is a man who is giving it 150% in the moment. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Yeah. I do have a follow up on that, Josh. I've never thought about it before, but is there a lowest or a lower limit for inflation? I mean, I always think about you don't want to blow up a tire too high. But when we say, you know, cut your PSI in half, you know, if he's, you know, normally I run my road tires at about 60 PSI. That means I'm essentially telling this guy, hey, you know, inflate to around 30. Is there a problem with that? I mean, just on the face of it?
It's a great question. And from a load perspective, there shouldn't be, right? Because the math, the math is just the math. You know, if you inflate a tire to 30 psi and you push on it with your thumb, not that hard, it deflects not that much. You know, if I try to like draw out the sort of boundary or edge cases, you know, like you know, we'd probably want to look at things like weight transfer when cornering. You know, like kind of at what speed can he corner without going? Because I think the worst of the boundary condition or boundary cases would be, you know, in fast cornering, it gets up on two wheels, and now you have 100% load as a side force in a single one of the rear wheels. Now you've got a problem. And so that would certainly be something to be avoided. But yeah, my guess on that from a cornering force thinking would be, you know, you're probably going to go to the calculator, cut it in half, put it in there. It's probably not fully understanding the weight shift, the left-right weight shift in cornering. You're probably going to corner hard one time and go, ooh, I don't like that. And then it's probably going to be a sneaking up from there, because what you're going to be trying to balance is that calculated value is probably going to be pretty spot on for that impedance kind of breakpoint that we'd like to talk about, but it's probably not going to be spot on from a cornering handling perspective, which is a little bit like, you know, what our calculator does, I think, is different from so many of the other ones with the front tire pressure. You know, like if your weight is 60/40, your tire pressures aren't biased 60/40, because we find that if you do that, you know, when you're descending aggressively and your weight shifts forward a little bit, then that front tire is now way too squishy, right? Or it handles vaguely. And so you try to compensate back for that. And, you know, certainly you're going to want to, you know, push yourself a little further into or past the breakpoint pressure to get that handling back. You know, because we don't want to trade, you know, seconds for crashing, right? That's a poor trade-off. But I think, I think as a starting point, you know, which is what all the calculators really are, that's actually not a bad place to start from pure efficiency terms. And then, you know, I would say, as we say, you know, small incremental upwards adjustments until the handling is good enough or acceptable.
Yeah,
Josh, my bicycling magazine showed up the other day, and of course you were in one of the articles there about rolling resistance, you helped Bicycling Magazine do some field testing to determine proper tire pressure. And the takeaway I got was something I think you said in there regarding, we've probably gotten the message out about getting pressures down, and we should probably steady out that message now. Like maybe we've gone too low in some cases. Did I read that properly?
So I will have to go buy a Bicycling Magazine because I did work with them on that, and I have not seen the article, so I have no idea what's in there. But yeah, I think it's like any great change in thinking. It's like a swinging pendulum, and we've definitely, after 15 years of pushing the pendulum away from high tire pressure, I think there are definitely certain places, areas, and people where it's swung way far the other way. And even to the point that we do get some pretty comical hate mail at times about, how our tire pressure calculator is recommending a pressure that's, 10 PSI over what I know to be proper. and partly I laugh. It's like, well, if you're on the proper tire pressure, why'd you come use my calculator? Right. But really, I mean, and like I said, the calculator is just a starting point. And it's really just trying to algorithmically use this huge pool of data to try to predict that breakpoint pressure, like that peak minimum rolling resistance, right? Where the tire hysteresis intersects with the casing losses of the tire intersect with the impedance curve. But my goodness, you can easily be, 5 or 10 PSI either side of that and be happy. And if you want to bias towards comfort with a lower pressure, go for it. But I think there are certain entities out there who've done a great job with their marketing of things like, bigger tires are faster, lower pressures are faster. These sort of very like simplified mantras that are true to a point or in a certain situation, or maybe were much more true 10 or 15 years ago when tires were much smaller and much, much higher pressure. But, I think we're getting to a spot now where, if you go and buy a new, high end Trek or Specialized, it's going to come with 28 millimeter tires, as a road bike, and if someone says, wider tires are faster, people are, that may not apply to you in your situation, right? Like if you're doing fast crit racing, like, you don't need to go out and buy 32s, right? Like you're already on the wider tire.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll have to read the article, but yeah, we have definitely noticed that in some of the feedback and from people using the calculator, and the good news is we've been, I would say, largely successful globally at spreading the word and at least the concept that these crazy high tire pressures aren't necessary. Now it's time for everybody, I think, to complicate their messages a little bit and get a little bit further down kind of into the details of, the what and the why, rather than just wider's better, lower's better.
Yeah. There is the lowest practical limit.
As we like to say, it depends.
Yeah. We need to get that "It Depends" T-shirt into production ASAP.
Right, we really do.
So here's another very practical question. This one coming into our voicemail inbox. The phone number for that is 317-343-4506. Any of our listeners can call with questions for these Ask Josh Anything episodes. This one is Dave from Indiana, so close to home for you there, Josh. He has a question of keeping his hydration as aero as possible for long time trials. I'll let you read through that, and then I'll just I have a little follow-up.
Yep.
You ready? All right.
I'm ready.
So I'm interested in your answer on this one, Josh, not just because of the hydration aspect, but also the frame bag piece. I'm wondering, is it possible for a frame bag to make a bike more aero? To me, it feels like would in most cases be less, just because of the places where the frame bag meets the frame and the connectors, the straps and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer here, other than it depends, is going to be that there's absolutely a way to make a frame bag that's super aero, but it's not going to be the frame bag that you can go out and buy. Right? I mean, I think if you were to, have a smooth, semi-rigid frame bag that, kind of fit almost, airtight to the bike and had smooth transitions to and from
sort
the
of heat
tubes
shrunk onto your tubes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, if you remember the Trimble, Trimble had a road bike, early 90s, that essentially was just a big solid front triangle, along with that really cool mountain bike he had that was basically like a big tube, like he was doing some crazy stuff. But something like that would be very aero. I think where we get in trouble in the reality of things is that, a soft-sided frame bag with all these like attachments, like from tubing and to the tubing and straps and zipper pulls, and you're now going to kind of have all of these other edges sticking out into space because nothing fits line to line as you'd want it to. And so, I would say best case scenarios is probably like a trade-off, right? You're gaining some aero by filling in that space and reducing some of the wakes from some of the cages, the bottles, some of that's going to get smoothed out, but then you're also just introducing a whole lot of other new things to dirty things back up. So my guess would be you're probably somewhere between a break even and slightly worse. But I don't know. I've never had it in the tunnel, so I have to think about that. I will say you're probably going to have more likelihood of doing good with a round tubed bike than with, a modern shaped tube bike. A lot of the modern bikes, I mean, from the big companies, even if the tubes look sort of round, there's generally some shaping being done there that actually can make a pretty big difference in aero terms. Whereas, round is it's just not a good aerodynamic shape, right? It's great for other things, ride quality and torsion and things like that. But which is it takes me to your question about let me read back into it. The Aero Bottle thing. Yeah, an Aero Bottle is really beneficial on a round tube bike, and there's a phenomenon that's actually pretty cool in aerodynamics. Like, even if you imagine like a round tube, and even if you just put a thin plate sticking out the back of it as a tail, it becomes significant. Like the CD drops somewhat significantly, and all you've really done is take away some of the power from the vortex shedding that's going to happen. You're kind of stopping it from wanting to set up this sort of shedding phenomenon where it like you shed a left side vortex, and then that creates a negative pressure that now sheds a right side vortex, and it oscillates back and forth. And so even though that plate isn't really in the flow at all, it will reduce the drag. Now, in this case, a lot of the Aero bottles on the market are really right about a similar width or thickness to like most steel tubed frames. And so, if you can fit one on there, do it. If you can fit two in there, that's probably better. And that you're taking, however long, essentially the length of the bottle's worth of round tubing, and making it improving the CD slightly on that area. But then too, with a little bit of crosswind, you've actually added a little bit of side surface area that can help drop your drag further as well. So I would definitely do that one. And the frame bag, I would say, if you want one, go for it. I don't think it's going to help you, but it probably also isn't going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. While we're on the topic of hydration, Fatty and I recently had a very good conversation on staying hydrated on our sister podcast over at Leadville.fm. Dr. Kevin Sprouse was our guest, And he had very valuable advice for any marginal gainer who wants to keep his performance from degrading because of dehydration.
We've actually had him on the show 3 times now. And I just learned a ton from him every time because he's got great practical guidance as well as the science to back it. So I'm really glad to say that Dr. Sprouse, who is also the EF Pro cycling team doctor, was involved in the development of feed formulas, which are brought to you by our new sponsor, The Feed, over at thefeed.com.
Feed formulas are personalized supplements for athletes following the same protocols the top pro athletes use. These are best-in-class branded supplements.
Yeah, and they're personalized for you based on your needs as an athlete. I've actually tried this out. They come in a nice little daily pouch, a month's worth at a time. And they're easy to remember because it's just, a pack a day, and they're easy to travel with. You don't have to take all your pill bottles with you. You just take a few pouches with you. And this is really cool. The first time you order a feed formula, you get 50% off. That is a good deal.
That is a good deal. Do they realize there's like inflation going on and like a whole supply chain thing?
Don't tell.
50% off. I can't get 50% off on anything right now. Okay. Be sure to check out.
I'm impressed they have inventory. We're out
right.
everything here. It's like,
hey, check out the feed formulas and the incredibly broad and deep array of nutrition and supplements for athletes at thefeed.com. All right, one last letter from Josh Parks, and he's asking a couple of questions here. In fact, this is something a lot of folks have noticed, and I saw some chatter online about this. During the Paris-Roubaix coverage on GCN specifically, they talked about tubeless tires contributing to what they thought was an increase in flats. I seem to remember just as many flats in the pre-tubeless days, says Josh Parks, although memories are short. In fact, I try to quantify this too, Josh Parks, looking into anywhere I could find any real data, any stories about more flats over fewer for this year. Couldn't find anything, really, where it was quantified. Can you comment, Josh, on your perceptions of the relative amount of flatting in the 2022 versus when you were involved testing the Zip wheels at the Paris-Roubaix this year? Next, he also asked, what do you think would have happened if, back in the day, a Zip wheel had potato chipped in Paris-Roubaix? Do you think that engineers are now taking too many risks in designing low-weight carbon rims? In other words, has the balance shifted toward weight instead of making it through the race?
Yeah, let's take these questions one at a time. Yeah, they're related, obviously, but still. First, Josh, do you think we are seeing more flats than we used to in pro races?
So having been there this year, and then also 2 weeks later was at the wind tunnel with EF and a number of athletes, and Andreas Clear, who we've had on the show, who's just one of my all-time favorite people. We got into this discussion, and the one thing that everybody we talked with agreed on was there were more flats this year because the weather was so nice. And that sounds a little bit silly, but when you watch how the race goes down, when the weather is good, the riders ride off the pave in the grassy gutters much more, right, than when it's wet. And we had very little rain leading up to it, so you had a really flat, hard grass gutter. And the problem with the grass gutter is the riders are pretty much completely blind to anything that's in that grassy gutter, right? So from an impact perspective, if there's a brick, right, or a hole in there, they just can't see it, and particularly because they're so tied up on each other, so it's rarely the first guy in the line that's hitting it. It's 3-4 guys deep. You're completely blinded. You hit what you hit. You don't even know what it is half the time, and you're going down. So flats were up a little bit to normal. I think with EF this year we had 2, so not a terrible number. I would say that's pretty common for them, but the big difference this year, though, was the broken wheels. I mean, and I think that is kind of a funny one, the way he poses his question of, do you think what would have happened if we had potato chipped a wheel in PR? Actually, I did potato chip a carbon wheel at Paris-Roubaix, 2 of them, front and rear, under Magnus Backstedt. in the Arenberg forest. The year before we were successful with Cancellara, and it was a big debacle. And Zip and me personally made it into Velo News used to do like a thumbs up, thumbs down thing in every issue. And Zip and I got thumbs down hard for trying to. I can't remember exactly what how they worded it, but it was whatever. It was quite negative. It hurt, but we knew we were onto something, so we kept going. But it did happen, and that was a case. Thank goodness, a couple other riders bent or broke aluminum wheels, but when they hit, it was Magnus hit a missing cobble, essentially, because people steal them, and they try to stay on top of that, but they don't always get there. So he just hit a huge hole, broke his wheels. A handful of other riders, Hincapi hit the same hole, broke his wheels. And so Magnus being, he's just one of the loveliest guys ever. He actually called me that night. He was driving to like Disneyland Paris or whatever with his family, and he called to just say like, "Hey, I saw the coverage. It looked really bad. There was nothing that could have been done." We had a little bit of a laugh about it too, because I think he was a little bit overweight compared to his race weight goal. But again, that didn't have much to do with it. I mean, it just made everybody look bad. So I do think a lot of companies are out there flying pretty close to the sun on weight. I think there's a lot of teams out there who are doing what they think the top teams are doing. That in turn is really not what the top teams are doing. We saw this the year after Cancellara won. I mean, it went from nobody could ride carbon wheels at Roubaix, and then once it was won on them, the next year everybody had carbon wheels, right? And that was the year. I mean, my God, every little French team just brought their normal carbon wheels and 23 millimeter tires, and I bet we saw 50 broken wheels in 2011 at Roubaix, because they all just assumed, carbon wheels are now good enough for Roubaix, and at that moment, that was only really true for one product. And as we see, I mean, even with as good as tubeless has gotten, teams are, running inserts. You still, I mean, if you hit something hard enough, it's just simple math. Like something's going to give. The tire's going to flat. The rim's going to crack. And then, of course, the other thing that's in play here that really wasn't in the early days of this was just the complete overwhelming number of cell phones and social media. When nobody knew that Backstedt broke his wheels in 2008, because there was nobody there with a camera phone, right? And there was no social media, or there was, but I mean, it just didn't happen, right? And, you look at, I can't remember who it was, like from Lotto, who comes sliding through the frame in that killer video that somebody put up on Twitter. I mean, we have that video from like 3 angles because there were so many people standing there filming the thing with their phones. And I think it's just ubiquitous. So I think you definitely have to, I really feel for the engineers and the developers for a lot of these new products. I mean, for years I couldn't even watch pro racing just for fear that like something would break, somebody gets hurt, we look bad. It really just sucked all of the enjoyment out of actually watching. And so, it's kind of dirty secret, like I was embedded for numerous Tours de France with various teams, for like the length of the entire thing, and never watched the racing, right? You travel from city to city and you're there at the start, you're there at the finish, but, I just didn't have the stomach, to watch it. And I certainly feel for the engineers of today, because they are under so much more of a microscope, than we were. So, my guess, my hypothesis would be that also has probably, that's probably reduced some of the risk taking in product development. I'm sure we were doing things back in the day that were probably a bit riskier than what they're willing to do now, because the penalties, the consequences are just so much higher. And I would say, a lot of that stuff is at the request of the riders, right? I mean, it's the riders want the lightest possible thing. Contador, I've talked a lot about, I remember getting in this huge fight with him and his mechanic because they wanted to use these aluminum spindled quick release skewers. Like, guys, it's an aluminum skewers. Like, you could die, right? And we all look bad. And your bike's already at 6.8, so we're just going to have to put 10 more grams back into the bottom bracket spindle. What the hell are you thinking? But for him, it was such a powerful mental thing if he had all this specially tuned lightweight equipment, even though it's not changing the actual, overall weight of the bike. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I would say, I'm looking for, we saw it a little bit last year with our first rainy Roubaix in a while, but I think where you're really, really going to see tubeless shining, from a puncture perspective is in the future rainy Roubaix. I think punctures are going to be half of what they used to be, particularly for teams using sealant, which is an old.
Yeah, keep the fast guys going, and let's see how that plays out. It was an interesting Roubaix. I mean, the other thing that kind of came out of Roubaix that I saw was that, man, it seems like the specialty Roubaix frame is kind of moving aside a little bit as, disc brakes have just proliferated. Now all these riders can get the size of tire they want in their regular road racing frame, and they seem to be happy to run those as opposed to a specialty frame. So it'll be interesting to see how, I love the Specialized Roubaix. I always loved that bike. I bought it when it first came out. I continue to say that's a great bike for most people, and I think on a consumer level, that endurance style of bike is still a great thing to go to, but for the racer, the person really racing Roubaix, they have a lot more options now. And one of the options is, hey, I'm going to stick with my regular road bike. That's what I like to ride. So that was another thing that came out this spring, Josh, that I was a little bit of a head scratcher, and I kind of get this, is there were some pictures and some write-ups about Wout van Aert's silicone tire treatment. And he put a bead of silicone just above the rim bead where the sidewall of the tire meets the rim. And it looked like he was trying to perfect the rule of 105 here with airflow. Is there anything here? Is that way too marginal gainy for anybody?
Yeah, it's usually so. That's people have been doing that since the 80s. We've done it with a lot of teams and athletes over the years. For the classics in particular, though, it's a fun one. You do get an improvement in airflow, right? It's just smoothing that little step. But I think more so than drag, you are actually, for the classics, you are actually adding, think of it as almost like a little impact bumper to the top of the hook on the rim there. And so it's just one more thing to cushion that tire in a bottom out condition, to prevent a pinch flat. And I will say, we really have gotten, not all the brands, but a lot of the brands out there. The wheels are strong enough that you are every bit as likely to pinch flat your tubeless tire as you just did, Fatty. You're every bit as likely to pinch flat the tubeless tire as you are to break the rim. And I think that says, really says a lot for everybody involved, because it's bloody hard to pinch flat a tubeless tire, even a lightweight, thinner one. You think you're literally ripping it apart by compressing it so hard over such a small area. That's an impressive feat, in a tire casing. And so, I don't work with them. And so I don't know exactly which of those they were after, or maybe both. But yeah, that's a technique that's been around, particularly Europe. I think it might've been originally documented. I think the Americans started doing it in the early 80s, around the time of the 84 Olympics. I'm sure one of our listeners who was there, should reach out and let us know. But that's where I know of first hearing about it. And people have been doing it for years since. So, yep, that's a fun one.
All right. Should we go ahead and close it? Any final thoughts? Brilliant insights? I'm going to close it then.
I don't think so. All right.
Let's do it.
All right. That's a great note to wrap this 24th episode of Ask Josh Anything, 78th episode of Marginal Gains. We are closing in on 100. It's
Crazy.
But we have barely made a dent in the questions that we have on the docket. So that does not mean, listeners, we don't want to hear from you. Please keep your questions coming.
And here's how you can do that. Leave a comment on this or any episode at marginalgainspodcast.cc or text or call the Marginal Gains hotline, 317-343-4506. Again, that's 317-343-4506.
Subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on Apple Podcast helps other questionable cyclists find us. So please do it. Unquestionable, yes. All types.
If you're looking for what platforms this show is available on, you'll see links to where we are, and frankly, we're on all of them. You find us at marginalgainspodcast.cc. Your personal recommendation, telling people in real life, is the best way, the best compliment you can give the show. We appreciate you doing that.
And once again, everybody, thanks for listening to Marginal Gains.
Okay, no, don't stop recording.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. For bonus questions.
I'll just pull it off the back end.
Oh, yeah, you've got
for the Leadville stuff. This will not do any formal introductions here. Josh will take care of all that when Fatty and I finalize the show. We're just going to hop right into the questions again. This is going to focus on the guides. Like, okay, I'm kind of between these two tires. I'm trying to decide how can I go out and test them in the field. So some principles on maybe field testing for mountain bike tires. What else? How do we balance the surfaces in our testing? So a little primer too on surfaces. That'll be my follow-up question. And the final would be if we run two models front and rear, are we only as fast as the slowest of the two? So that's kind of the three questions. How do I test? How do I balance surfaces, considering Leadville's a multi-surface event, and front and rear differences, if there are any? Okay. When we're running different models, front and rear, because mountain bikers love to do that. We love to put a different front tire on than rear. So, okay.
Smoke and dart.
You can just jump in. I don't know if you can see these questions. Are you going to want to jump in here? How do you want to do that? Patty? Hello? He didn't.
Couldn't tell if you were frozen or just being really still.
I would say, Hadi, you know the questions best. Do you want to just go ahead and jump right in with them? Go for it.
Rifle right through them then. That's fine with me. Yeah. Okay. All right, Josh. Well, thanks for coming over to the mountain bike side and being on the Leadville Trail 100 Mountain Bike Podcast. A lot of folks know you for CDA and aerodynamics. You're also great with tires and have done a lot of experimenting and testing in this area with pro teams, specifically in Europe. We want to corner you here on the trail real quick because, a lot of our listeners get down to near a few weeks before race day and they're trying to decide between one tire or the other. They're pretty much, have narrowed down a large field of knobby tires to maybe a couple of them. So what we want to try to do is help them out maybe in testing these tires and getting some idea what might be faster over the other. Not so much concerned about grip. We'll let them focus more on grip, about what kind of knobby pattern they're choosing, but let's try to help them figure out what tire might be their fastest choice. So, and this is obviously true for the athlete who has no sponsor commitment. Like the field of tires is wide open to them. They can pick what they want. So how would you, if you were hired to consult a mountain biker or a mountain bike team, how would you have them go out and test a tire, a mountain bike tire, or tires, I should say, for efficiency, for speed?
I think your best fit here is the Chung virtual elevation testing, right? Chung method that we talk about a lot on our other show. There's a software you can download. It's free. It's called Golden Cheetah. And it really allows you to, virtual elevation is this most fascinating thing. It allows you to take really kind of crude, imperfect data and actually find some really quite precise measurements of CDA and CRR when both of those are unknown. And so essentially what you're doing is you're making iterative guesses about one until something like the CRR becomes flat in this big calculation. And so what you really need is a place where you can do some laps on a surface that is more or less the surface that you're racing on, or as similar as possible. So, in an ideal world, I think of Olympic events, and we have done off-road testing, cyclocross, those sorts of things. Like if we have access to the course beforehand, we just use the course as our lap. But you really just need a couple of laps of a course where the rider is going to maintain their position as much as possible, so that you can try to have a fixed CDA, right? You're trying to be as consistently aerodynamic as possible. And that's going to let us hone in on finding this CRR, or rolling resistance coefficient, value. And so, this is a method we use with tons of teams and athletes also to test for pressure, because it is sensitive enough to find that impedance breakpoint pressure if you're moving it. So, maybe pick a pressure that you would normally ride and ride 5 PSI above, 5 PSI below, mountain bike terms like 2 PSI above or 2 below, to try to, ferret out if one of those is different. But your optimal Chung course shape would be sort of a saddle, and you need to be able to complete the lap without braking, because using the brakes, introduces a whole bunch of stuff that we're not solving for, a whole bunch of uncertainty. So, if you've got here in Indiana, we're lucky because there's roundabouts everywhere. I think we have the roundabout capital of the world, Carmel, Indiana. And so you can actually do some really interesting Chung courses on various surfaces by connecting roundabouts, or just riding city blocks, or there's a ton of ways to do it.
So here's the rub at Leadville. It's a multi-surface event, and you've seen this at Roubaix, your experience at Roubaix, where they're riding cobbles, riding pavement. At Leadville, we have crushed granite, we have rocky conditions, we have loose over hard, we have packed dirt, and we have pavement. So how do we balance out those surfaces in our testing?
I would take the course map. We do this with Roubaix. Take the course map, break it down by percentage of surface. Because it is one of the things about Roubaix that, until you ride it, you don't really think about. But, they're not all the Arenberg forest, right? There's like the Arenberg and the Carrefour de l'Arbre at the end. The Arenberg's the worst. The Carrefour's probably second. But some of them are really not that bad. And so, you need to know, like, okay, what do we, I would say too, what the type of racing you're planning is probably a little bit different. A lot of what we're doing in road racing sometimes is saying, hey, this year it's raining. And so like you need to be at the front and we're going to attack in the Arenberg forest. And so you want to optimize everything for that moment of attack. An event like Leadville, in my mind, at least, I think of it as more like a time trial, right? We're trying to like find the shortest overall time. It's not, Fatty's going to try to drop Hottie at mile, 73 or whatever. So I would look at it by percentages, and you're going to want to start by optimizing in the direction of your highest percentage surface. And then I would say for how much pavement is it?
Fatty, what do you got on pavement there? 30% maybe?
I was going to put it closer to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because that really is probably your easiest one. I wouldn't even bother to optimize on pavement because you're not going to use that number anyway. But I might take the others and say, my worst surface is here, maybe look at 2 or 3 tires. It just depends. I don't have tons. I look at bicyclerolling-resistance.com and some of the other independent places that do rolling resistance, and you can see, 4, 5, 10 watts between tires. And I will say that the data from BRR is not going to be data that you get in the real world. Your real world numbers will be bigger. But the trends are consistent.
Right.
If he says a tire is 4 watts faster on a smooth drum, it's going to also be faster on crushed granite or crushed gravel or whatever you're riding. So that's a heck of a starting place. I might take the top tires from his list and then, look at testing between them.
Oh, that's actually quite helpful.
Start with your...
I've been to that site and I've looked over that tire list, and it's the interesting thing is we've been running a poll too on the participants page And I don't see many of the tires on that list showing up on our poll results, which is so maybe folks want to look at bicycle rolling resistance and just give it a quick glance and go, well, maybe I do consider this or this brand or this model before I make my final choice, and then take it out for a little field testing. If you're totally into this level of marginal gains for your Leadville Trail 100. One last question, Josh. Another thing mountain bikers love to do, and I don't know if you see this in many other disciplines on the road or otherwise, is we love to run different modeled and sometimes different make tires front and rear, and often different size tires front and rear. Are we only as fast as the slowest of the two, or how do those balance out? And what should we be aware of when we're doing that?
Ooh, well, first of all, the different brands of tire front and rear I struggle with. I mean, the marginal gainer in me sees some possible potential here, but the aesthetic side of me is like cringing. Do you mix tan wall and black wall? I mean, would you do
Never.
that? That just hurts my soul thinking about it. Wow. Man, I actually just posed the question to myself. If I knew it were faster, would I do it? I don't know if I would.
Yes, you would. But we will run different style of knobbies, front and rear, and different sizes front and rear.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. You're essentially, I mean, you're like by Chung method, the CRR value that you're going to get is going to be some blend of the front and the rear tire, right? So you are not as slow as the slowest tire, but you're also not then as fast as the faster one. So you're going to be somewhere in the middle. And you know, I would think from a tread pattern perspective, you know, like if we were to do some testing and say, oh, this tire's, you know, considerably faster than that tire, but this tire doesn't have, say, enough tread to, you know, get me up this key climb in the event if it's wet, then you probably want to bias towards the tread. I mean, you know, certainly we don't have we don't really have any mountain bike tire test data on our test machine here, but we definitely see with gravel tires, I mean, typically the more tread, the slower the tire is a good way to think of it, because there's just more material there. There's more squirm. You know, if the tread actually forces the casing to deflect more under its location. But at the same time, I also know that in certain conditions, you know, like you're not going to stay upright without it. So we don't want to, you know, we don't want to be 5 seconds faster and then on our butt, you know, 10 different times in the event. To look at that, I would say the other piece of this, or other, I guess, directional way to look at it is, especially if you look at the bicycle rolling resistance site as starters, there are certainly companies that have technologies that are faster than other companies' technologies. And so, like, you know, if your tire is not on that list, you might find, or maybe there's a version of your tire that's, you know, I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I know like Continental has some really phenomenal rubber encasing technology right now. And a bunch of the tires at the top of that list are Continental. And I think it's like the Speed King. So there's a number of them. They all have speed in the name. And, you know, and I think that might be another way to look at it, of like, well, the tire I want to ride isn't there, but it's a speed something. You're probably in pretty good shape, because that's, you know, we see that, like the black chili compound is another really solid technology from them, that, you know, the black chili rubber is just faster than the non-black chili rubber. So, you know, kind of look at it from that direction.
Yeah, well, for folks listening, obviously there's much more to consider with your tire choice than just speed. I mean, obviously you have flat protection you're worried about. Grip, which Josh alluded to there, is also a consideration, which is going to affect your overall speed. So while the bicycle rolling resistance list is a great place to start, that's a speed list. You got to balance out your other things as you head into Leadville. But in the end, if you're down to a few tires and you want to kind of figure out, okay, what's the fastest one, and is that the one I want to go out and field test that thing, like Josh said, using the Chung method, if you get up to speed on it. And again, it's not that difficult to use if you've got a little computing skills and a little time, and it's a great way to do it. And again, try to replicate that section of the course. I'm thinking, Fatty, like Pipeline is like that area where if you can replicate that wherever you are in the States, that that loose over hard surface, where you are trying to lay down some time, that's probably a great Chung method course to try and use. Josh, thanks for joining us. Thanks for a little tire guidance as we head to this epic event we call Leadville.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. That'll add some cred to our discussion. Which
yeah, I'm excited to come out there and see it. I've talked about it. People ask me about it all the time, and I haven't been on a mountain bike literally in 20 years.
Bring the wax chain mantra's already penetrated the market there. Definitely